Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about, I'm going to sneeze. Today we are going to talk about my IVF consultation and everything that came after that since then. So, my husband and I went and we sat down and we talked to the doctor, and he gave us this lovely packet and explained to us what IVF is and how they do it. At one point in the conversation, he was explaining the egg retrieval. So IVF is like a multi-step process for those of you that don't know anything about IVF. There's lots and lots of steps to IVF. And one of them is the egg retrieval day. So they actually sedate you intravenously and you take a little nap and they aspirate the eggs out of your follicles. And while they do that, your husband or partner or sperm donor goes and delivers his sample so that it's ready when your eggs are ready and they can inseminate them. Well, at one point he was telling us about the egg retrieval, and then he goes, and hopefully while you're doing that, you're the donor. So he called my husband the donor, which I think is funny. So now I feel like I need to make him a shirt that says the donor when we go for egg retrieval, because it'll be super funny. At least for me. I'll laugh. In this packet, we've got an IVF checklist. There's a information for their financial counselors and the scheduling your IVF calendar visit, which is what comes next. There's a contact sheet for mail order pharmacies that usually give good discounts for cash. There's a fact sheet on the risks of in vitro. There's a fact sheet on weight and fertility, and then they gave you a BMI chart, your body mass index table. In this little packet thing, there is also a pamphlet and a rather thick, like there's a lot of papers in here on your, oh, I wonder when this has to be filled out. Anyways, long-term embryo storage if you need it. So the clinic that we go to will hold on to your embryos until you have a baby. So they don't like ship them off once you get pregnant. It's when you deliver a baby, then they will send them to a bigger city for storage indefinitely, or until you donate, or this sounds harsh, but destroy them to you don't need them anymore kind of a thing. Or if you want them back, they just hold on to them. There's also like this crazy amount of consent. So there's consent for in vitro and embryo transfer, which is a thick amount of pages. There's consent for cryopreservation and storage of embryos. There is the consent for superovulation therapy, a consent to thawing and utilization of cryopreserved embryos. My stuff's falling all over the place. There is a reproductive medicine consent to transfer out of frozen materials, and the sperm cryopreservation for IVF in case you go to give a sperm sample and your numbers fluctuate so much that they will actually freeze sperm for the insemination part. So that way if your partner, sperm donor, whatever, can't perform on the day of the egg retrieval, you have some frozen so they can use that. Also, there is a thing for acupuncture at the time of embryo transfer. So I've actually heard really good things about doing acupuncture right before the transfer and then right after the transfer. So I will probably utilize this. I've been getting acupuncture done since we started seeking treatment for infertility, and I really enjoy it. I've been going to a sort of local naturopath, and I really like the acupuncture, if only for the fact that I get to go for 30 minutes and just completely relax, and it's fantastic. I love it. So at the IVF consultation, we basically talked about how our infertility journey has gone so far, the clinic's process. They do use something called ICSI, and that is when they inject the sperm directly into the egg instead of just letting them kind of get introduced to each other. They do the ICSI because they figure if the IUIs haven't worked for you, it's generally a failure of fertilization, and so they will go ahead and just do the injection of the sperm into the egg, which I've also heard that I didn't know this before, but I have heard that people with endometriosis actually have an extra layer on their eggs, which makes it really hard for the sperm to penetrate. So ICSI is generally the way you go when you have endometriosis. So I just thought that was interesting because I didn't really know that before. My sister-in-law actually told me that. We will be using ICSI for our IVF. I didn't get a chance to ask. There's a lot of questions on my list of things to ask that I didn't ask at all. We were running late, so I was already really flustered. I was embarrassed for being late, and I didn't even pull out my journal with all of my questions in it, so I feel kind of stupid for not asking. So that's good. But along with this little packet thing, they gave me a video to watch, which I watched last night. It explains why you shouldn't exercise during stimulation, and you can twist an ovary, and it can be really painful, and if you twist it bad enough it can shrivel up and die. That's horrifying. Nobody told me that. I've heard don't exercise, but nobody says why. That's scary. I don't want to do that. So I'll be doing a lot of walking and probably crying because I'll be emotional, but that's okay. It's fine. I'll just burn calories by crying. Be good. Be good. Anyways, so at the consultation continued. He said, yep, let's go ahead with IVF. If you're comfortable with it, let's go ahead. He said that he would talk to his financial counselor. She would send a note to insurance. And I was like, well, you don't really have to. I called them already. They said I don't need any pre-authorization. And he didn't believe me. So he said, no, we got to go through Karen. And I was like, okay, cool. So I was going to call the next day and then completely ran out of time. I was busy running errands and stuff. And so I called the day after the next day. And I talked to Karen and she's like, nope, I'm glad you called me. Your insurance doesn't require pre-authorization anymore. They used to, but as of July of last year, they don't. So we can go ahead and just get this started. So we scheduled the calendar visit, and the calendar visit is going to be in February. So in February, when I start my cycle in February, I have to call and I will start birth control, and I will get a lab done. So they'll draw my blood on my day one or around day one. And then later on in the month, we will go and do our calendar appointment. So the calendar appointment is actually going to be 4 appointments in one. So at that appointment in middle of February, we are going to go in and we're going to do a trial transfer. I've heard that this is definitely something you want to do. You basically go in and they do a mock transfer, but they do a transfer so you know what to expect, and then they do a saline sonogram. Along with that, they'll also do labs on my husband and I, so more blood work. Then we will meet with a nurse who's gonna do the med teach, so she's gonna teach us how to do all of the shots and take the medications and stuff like that. After that, we will talk with the IVF nurse, and the IVF nurse is going to give us a schedule for all of our medications and all of our appointments, and we're going to go that way. So we will do that, and then after we meet with the IVF nurse, we will meet with Karen, the financial counselor, and we will put down a 20% deposit. Now Karen is super nice. I talked to her on the phone, and she gave me a super long list of all of the the breakdown for everything. So if you want to know what the breakdown is, I'll share that, because I don't know, it just seems like you could get this information anywhere. So if you want to know what the breakdown for our IVF cycle is going to cost, I'm more than happy to do a video on that. The basis is that we are going to have to put down 20% when we go to the office for our calendar visit in February, and that 20% for us is going to be $4,688. which is a lot of money. And I'm glad that I have been saving, and looking at this total that insurance pays for, I am super grateful that insurance pays, my insurance pays. So not everybody is lucky, not everybody has, and it's not even luck. Insurance is just stupid, because a lot of insurances don't, they determine how ill you are or what is an actual illness, and a lot of insurance companies don't view infertility as an illness. They view it as a choice. If you can't have babies naturally, it's your choice to pursue IVF or whatever, where it's not really our choice to not have babies naturally. If I could just go have sex with my husband right now and get pregnant, I totally would. We've been trying to do that this whole time. So it's bullshit, basically. I ended up just being extremely lucky that our insurance will pay. The only downside is that our insurance is actually a lifetime cap. So it only gives us a quantity of money for a lifetime. If we use all of that in this one cycle, it's done. We have to pay completely out of pocket the next cycle. Fingers crossed for one and done. I know that doesn't happen very often, but fingers crossed. The other thing we have to consider is, I think it's PGT and PGS. These have different ones. Yeah, PGD and PGS testing. This clinic that we're going to only does frozen transfers. They don't like to do fresh transfers because when you're coming off of all of the hormones and the surgery to get the eggs out, they find that a lot of people are not ready. Their bodies aren't ready to accept an embryo. And so they have you wait for a cycle or two. Generally it's 8 weeks until they do a frozen transfer. So you'll kind of just go home, rest, take it easy, and then you don't have to do any shots until you get closer, and then they start you on the estrogen patches and the progesterone and oil shots right before the transfer, and then you do the transfer frozen. So when you freeze your embryos, you can choose or you can elect to have them genetically tested to see if they are normal. Generally what it sounded like the doctor said is he advises people who are over the age of 30 or especially over the age of 35 to have their embryos checked, because a lot of times they have abnormalities at that point. Honestly, I'm leaning towards not doing the testing. It is, it's not really about, it is at this point a little bit about the money, but it's not. I mean, for those of you that are testing, I completely understand why. However, this is our first cycle, and I think we're just gonna go with, maybe depending on how many embryos we end up with frozen, I think we're gonna go with not testing. And that's just my personal opinion, and I don't know, that's kind of just what I'm leaning towards now. It might change. We're supposed to have a telehealth, which is like they have an app that we can use, so we'll meet with genetic counselor online before the calendar visit, and we will go ahead and I guess discuss all of it. So maybe I'll change my mind after we have that conversation. As of right now though, I'm leaning towards not doing the genetic testing. I don't know, I'm just leaning towards not doing it. So that is about it for the IVF consultation and everything that came after, because it was a little crazy, it was a little nuts. I have, like, when I was on the phone with Karen, I like took all these crazy notes all over my paper because when I called, she was at lunch, but I was like sitting on the couch and I had my notebook and my pen, and then when she called back, like I had nothing, so I'm like scrambling for paper and a pen and just kind of wrote it all over the place. So that is where we are at right now in the IVF process. We're just waiting. It's all a waiting game. The entire thing is just a waiting game. So that's what we're doing. We're waiting again because that's all we do. But that's okay. It's fine. It's gonna be fine. So, yes, that is what we're doing right now. But thank you guys for watching and returning to watch. I'm gonna go to work now, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Thanks again for stopping in and watching and following along our infertility journey. And yeah, we will go from there. And it's genital testing on your embryos.